I've been a sports journalist for 10 years now. And so when Rouleur Magazine, a specialist cycling magazine, had this idea of I guess, tackling the Me Too issue within cycling, they came to me about it because I've worked in women's cycling. The magazine editors had sat down and said, why has cycling not had a Me Too moment? We've seen it everywhere in society, or we think we've seen it everywhere in society, and because we've all heard about it, we've had so many stories, we almost assume that if we haven't heard it in a certain domain, that must mean that there's no problem there. So they wanted to know, is it a case of we have no problem with sexual abuse or sexual harassment in the sport? Or is it a case that still the riders, even in this day and age, even after the advent of Me Too, don't feel confident to be able to speak out, and maybe no one has ever asked them the questions? My instinct was that we probably don't have a problem because I work in the sport and because I'm a woman in the sport, and I go to races and I speak to riders and I speak to team managers, and I thought surely if cycling has a problem with sexual abuse, with sexual harassment, I would know about it, or I would have heard whisperings about it or rumours about it. And I look back on that and realise how horrifically naive that was. But I guess everyone sort of thought the same. My first port of call was to contact Iris Slappendale, who is well known within the sport. She's a former rider, she's very respected, and a few years ago she and a few others started a women's cyclist union. So it is the first port of call now for riders to go to if they've got an issue, and I thought, well, if anyone's going to know what the situation is, it's Iris. And the way she spoke to me, I thought that she also thought maybe there wasn't much of an issue to be exposed, but the things that she was telling me, even anecdotally, made me realise, well, hang on a minute, your version of what's going on in the sport is very different to mine, because even what you're saying rings alarm bells for me. So she started talking about, for example, she said, well, we all know of certain teams or certain team managers where relationships take place, for example, that managers will have relationships with their riders and in some cases several relationships, and we've all heard about these breakdowns of relationships and what that means for the team and what that means for the rider. And I thought, well, I haven't heard that, so that's new. And it did ring alarm bells because the managers are in a position of power, in a position of responsibility and trust, and even if it's a consensual relationship, that there's an imbalance there that I think in most walks of life, in most industries, would be frowned upon at the very least. So if there were managers who were doing this with several riders, then I thought, well, that's not a good starting point. So she contacted a number of riders, and quite quickly I got some numbers and names back again, and started to make phone calls, and it all started from there. The first rider I spoke to, again, almost referred to a culture rather than any details and any specifics, but again it rang alarm bells because I thought this isn't the kind of atmosphere, it isn't the kind of working practice that I think is healthy and good. And cycling is a very unusual sport. So we have stage races, so one day after another, where the riders will travel from one place to another and the whole team moves with them. And because of the logistics of that, riders will share bedrooms. So it's quite an infantilized sport in that way, where they don't even get their own personal space, but riders and team members will all share bedrooms. And this one rider spoke to me about an issue that she'd had with one female member of staff who was being forced at that stage to share a bedroom with a male member of staff. Which to most of us, you would think, how on earth? Can you imagine going to a business conference and being told you're sharing a bedroom with your male colleague? So sharing bedrooms is normal. Sharing bedrooms between genders is not normal at all, and it shouldn't be normal. That's the point. And so the riders all complained because the male member of staff would also be sharing bathroom facilities with the female riders. And the team didn't want to know. They said, well, can you not just put up with it? Because we don't have much money and it'll cost more money to book an extra room. So the riders clubbed together and said, well, we'll pay for the bedroom. And they booked an extra bedroom for the male member of staff. And eventually the team took it seriously and they footed the bill for the extra room. But it struck me that she shouldn't have to be making that stand. You know, if the female member of staff said, I don't want to share a room with a male member of staff, that should be enough, really. And it wasn't. The rider who made me realise that there was a problem and that it was a big problem is a rider I'll call Rosa, because she wants to protect her anonymity, which is understandable when you know what's happened to her. So she was a teenager. She's North American. She'd come over to Europe to race in Europe. And she was on an outfit that you would imagine would be about as professional as you can get for someone of that age, at least, a development squad for the top tier of women's racing. So they had a professional squad at the top with some of the best riders in the world, and she was part of that feeder team. So she came over and she was riding her first big stage race, so it's one day after another. And with cycling, especially with stage racing, because there are so many kilometres that the riders have to cover, they have massage at the end of each stage to help their muscles to recover and to get them in as good a position as possible for the next day. And she was lying having her first massage on this team. And she said that the soigneur, which is the name for the members of staff who give the massage and are supposed to be looking after the riders, but the masseur started the massage and started getting very high in her legs. She was wearing underpants, but he got higher and higher, and she said she felt a little bit uncomfortable, and then he started to run his thumb along the length of her vagina, and he did that several times. And she said she was completely shocked and almost paralysed and didn't know what to do. It was her first experience as a teenager racing in Europe on what was supposed to be a fairly professional outfit. And she actually thought, is this okay? Is this what is supposed to happen? Is he supposed to touch me there? If I say something, does that make me wrong? Is this what happens in Europe? So she spoke to a few of the other riders afterwards, and it's sad because none of them are fully formed adults yet. They don't know what the boundaries of normality are or should be in the adult world. And so it was sort of skirted around a little bit. And they all said, oh, that massage went a little bit high, didn't it? And they all agreed that it was uncomfortable, and they all agreed that it was a bit odd, but no one felt in a position to be able to speak out because female cycling is a very precarious industry anyway. She was trying to get a spot on this team. She was trying to get through the development squad to get onto the elite team. You speak up against a masseur, a member of staff who's been there longer than you, and you put your position in jeopardy. So this member of staff kept giving these massages throughout the stage race, throughout the duration, day after day of these races. And the girls, and I will call them girls, were lying on the massage table in shared space. So they had a shared living room. And they'd all be present while he was doing this underneath a towel in front of them. The stage race finished and Rosa went back to North America. And on the plane was able to process things. And she spoke to her parents and they agreed that they should speak up and say something. So she wrote to the team management and explained that there had been an issue. She didn't go into the detail about the physical sexual assault, but she did say that he made her uncomfortable and that he'd crossed boundaries. The team said, well, essentially, you've got to get on with it and we're not going to do really anything about it. We've spoken to the member of staff in question. We're sure it won't happen again. And so she was having to come back to Europe to race in the following summer. And she was told that she was going to have to share a house with this member of staff for the duration of the couple of weeks that she was there. In the meantime, an elite rider had an encounter, whatever that encounter was, with this member of staff and had complained about it. And because it was an elite rider, then the team took it seriously. So off the back of that, he was eventually fired. And so Rosa had a mixture of feelings. She was partly relieved, as you would be, but she was also angry. Because why is it that a more senior rider, that their word is more important than hers? In any position of responsibility, surely you listen to the child first. You know, she wasn't an adult yet. You should take their word more seriously than an elite rider. But luckily, at least, the elite rider was in a position where they were able to speak out and they were able to be listened to, and so the member staff was fired. However, that was not the end of his time in the sport. And so Rosa has seen him at races since, and he's tried to strike up a relationship with her again since on social media. And it's not something that has ever been dealt with. So he's done that. He has physically sexually abused girls of 16 and 17 years of age, and he's still in the sport. It's disgusting, it's shocking, and it absolutely has to be the situation where that cannot happen again. It's really difficult to know how much of this is specific to cycling and how much of it is societal. And that's the difficulty I have as a journalist, as a female journalist, because any woman in society will have experienced some form of power abuse. Maybe not any, maybe not even most, I don't know, but I guess because I put myself in that position. And we tend to think that post Me Too, that everything's come out in the wash. It certainly hasn't. I don't think cycling is any worse than anywhere else, but I just think it's still so endemic in society. But I think that it has to be that it is no longer acceptable and it's no longer okay. And cycling is one of these sports where, or it's one of these industries even. I mean, you look at something like modelling, or acting, in which the objectifying of someone else is part and parcel of the industry. To an extent, cycling and sport are also like that, because you've got to study the physical form, and your physical form is fair game, really, because the size of your bum or the size of your legs or the size of your arms are all relevant to performance. And in any sport where it's more tactile, I'm thinking of maybe gymnastics, or, you know, again in cycling where you get the massage, then again the boundaries could be arguable, you know. But they're the areas and they're the industries and they're the sports where surely the rules have to be really clear. It has to be that we have a very set framework, that above a certain area is absolutely no go. I mean, it should not need to be a part of an education process that a man does not touch a woman's vagina without invitation. But we do need set boundaries, I think, be they linear on the body or be they emotional. It's all the more important, I think, in sport, in these industries that are more tactile. But also, sport is an industry that deals an awful lot with young people and vulnerable people, because most of us can go to work and maybe hide behind a computer and we can hide behind a desk. In sport, there is nowhere to hide. Your performance is on view for everyone. And so I think that sport, while it is reflective of wider society, it is also quite specific. But if we are holding up these athletes and looking to these athletes to achieve our goals and our dreams, because we all like to live vicariously through them, we have to protect them. You know, they're not there just for our entertainment. They are people. They are daughters. They are sisters, and they need to be looked after as much as anyone. So one of the really good things about me tackling this issue is that I have been approached by different people asking how can they help, you know, and I've had a few federations get in touch. British Cycling got in touch, USA Cycling got in touch and said, without breaching the journalist source confidentiality contract, if you like, tell us how we can help protect our riders. And that to me is incredibly encouraging. And so I was contacted by a woman called Kelsey Erickson, who is on USA Cycling. And she is part of the Safe Sport initiative in the US. And this came about because of the gymnastics scandal and the sexual abuse cases that happened within gymnastics. That USA, as a governing entity, as a sporting entity, decided that we've got to do something to protect our athletes. So Safe Sport is that vehicle. And they try to train people involved in sports, especially dealing with vulnerable people, children, best practice. And it's also somewhere that athletes can go to be able to flag up any issues. So sports will have a Safe Sport representative. So the USA Cycling Safe Sport representative got in touch with me and it, to my mind, had a fantastic idea, because she was saying that, you know, we've got the World Anti-Doping Agency is the umbrella organisation for doping. And riders know if you're caught doping anywhere in the world, you will face the same punishment. And the idea is, why don't we have this for abuse? Why don't we have some sort of an umbrella movement that means that if you're operating in an Olympic sport, for example, and you are the victim of abuse, that you can make a complaint about that and know that there is an international sanction and it's a universal sanction. So we're not relying on individual jurisdictions to deal with this, in individual cycling federations or individual sporting federations, that it could be a pan-Olympic sport organisation that deals with abuse. So we've got the anti-doping code. Why don't we have an anti-abuse code?